Hi, everyone. This week we're doing our book, Purity and Danger by Mary Douglas. It's a challenging book, as I've said, but I think it's worthwhile and it illuminates some things, some contemporary issues. What I'm going to do now is give you a little bit of an introduction to kind of guide you as you begin to read this book. One of the things that's important that this book does is it takes on our bias towards spirituality in religion. I think that often we have a kind of an unwritten view of religion, that religion in its deepest, most important way is about spirituality and how we feel inside. And this is a book that tries to look instead at things that we think is sub-religious: hygiene, borders, dirt, pollution, taboos, differences between males and females, these kind of broad cultural values that we think of as kind of indifferent, or at best, kind of social and cultural. Mary Douglas is going to be making the argument these are really at the center of religion and understanding what religion is. In fact, perhaps much better guides to thinking about religion than spirituality and kind of high thinking about theology, the Trinity, or what have you, about God. We'll see if you end up agreeing with her. Now, we've already seen some of this in our reading from the book of Leviticus, for example, and Exodus, where we've seen laws and concern with food and hygiene and issues like that. And one way to see, to read a text like that is to say, well, that's kind of left in the past. That's now the kind of public health departments and regulations about, germs and pollution. And we kind of left that behind. And now our religion is about kind of spirit and what's inside us. And this is a book that says it's always been part of religion and it continues to be part of religion. And we have this very false view of religion because we've kind of learned to not understand hygiene and pollution as being part of our modern religious mindset. Now, the thesis of the book is in the introduction, and you should read the introduction. I'll give you a little bit of a guide to reading this. What I would say, read the introduction. Chapter 1 is really a history, and I'll give you a summary of that in a moment. And then chapter 2 is the most important for your reading for Monday. And that's what I would like you to go through closely. In the introduction on page 3, you get basically her thesis in this book. In this book, I have tried to show that rituals of purity and impurity create unity in experience. So far from being aberrations from the central project of religion, they are positive contributions to atonement. By their means, symbolic patterns are worked out and publicly displayed. Within these patterns, disparate elements are related and disparate experience is given meaning. Okay, so let's think about that for just a moment. Rituals of purity and impurity create unity in experience. So compare this to Geertz. Remember our definition of religion that we got from Geertz. A system of symbols which acts to establish powerful, pervasive, long-lasting moods and motivations in men by formulating conceptions of a general order of existence. Now, that general order of existence we've thought of in terms of intellectual content. Douglas is kind of bringing that down and saying our general order of existence is also all these definitions of what's in place and out of place, what's clean and unclean, what's pure and what's impure, what's polluted and what's okay. These are categories that are very important in religion. And when we think of the general or conceptions of a general order of existence, these rituals of purity and impurity are right there at the center. These aren't aberrations from the central project of religion. They are positive contributions to atonement. When we think of atonement, that's a very religious word, right? But it's often salvation, the ultimate end of a religion, making you right with God and the world. And hygiene and pollution notions aren't um, aberrations from that central goal of religion, but they are right there at the center of what it means to be religion. And they contribute, they are images, symbols of the grander notions of being right with God, right with the world. Symbolic patterns are worked out and publicly displayed by means of these things. Now that is gonna be the challenge. That's what you have to kind of get your head around, is what does it mean to think about hygiene and pollution and taboo in terms of symbolic patterns. And that's what we're going to be talking about this week. Now, she gives us our first clue. If you turn the page to page 4, and here we have her talking about what this would mean. For example, this is on the middle of page 4. There are beliefs that each sex is a danger to the other through contact with sexual fluids. According to other beliefs, only one sex is endangered by contact with the other, usually males from females, but sometimes the reverse. She's speaking very broadly anthropologically. Such patterns of sexual danger can be seen to express symmetry or hierarchy. It is implausible to interpret them as expressing something about the actual relation of the sexes. I suggest that many ideas about sexual dangers are better interpreted as symbols of the relation between parts of society, as mirroring designs of hierarchy or symmetry which apply in the larger social system. So what do we do if you read in the book of Leviticus or Numbers about menstrual periods for women, or various kinds of fluids related to sex, and which a number of religions treat about? That isn't necessarily about primitive health concerns. Those are also concerns about the symbolic relationship of the sexes. So in other words, these notions about purity are being used to symbolically set out hierarchies and relationships. She's also going to argue here on page 4 about food. What you can take into your body and what you can't take into your body are ways of setting out in a kind of picture form, a symbolic form, the ordering of society as a whole. And so she's offering that we investigate these things in religion as symbols, as ways that society has come to picture larger notions of hierarchy and order and insider. We are misled if we purely try to think about them as indifferent matters of hygiene. All right. And this is something that I think is another way that you can look at our own culture and investigate our culture. Notions about inside out, pure, impure, relations of sexes, and sexuality, all these things are part of this broader shared religious view that we have in society. So I think she opens doors to thinking about angles in our contemporary life that we don't connect with religion, but through this religious lens. Okay, now chapter 1 is going to be largely kind of a history of scholarship. And the history of scholarship in this area is to gradually dismiss magic and hygiene as being kind of sub-religious. Then she kind of traces how they kind of came back in and how anthropologists and sociologists came to see them as being kind of important and connected to this idea of the study of religion. I'm going to say that there's some things you can kind of skim through chapter 1. And you don't have to spend too much time on that. What I do want to point out is that early on, she talks about the notion of sacred. And if there's any word that we connect with religion, it's the sacred. And in its roots, in a number of languages, it's about being set apart. It's about being not part of the common. It can't touch the common. It can't be defiled, right? So from the very start, our notion of the sacred has to do with separation and hygiene, basically, right? So that's an interesting point. Something that's so central to religion is right off the bat and immediately connected to pollution and hygiene. Okay, so look through the chapter one. There's interesting stuff in there. What I want you to get to is chapter two, which is a shorter chapter. And that's what I'd like you to spend the most of your time looking at. I want to make clear one passage from there, which is at the very start. There's a reference to medical materialism. What is that? Medical materialism is the idea that when we come to, like, why in the Hebrew Bible are the people of Israel banned from eating pork? One approach to that, which has very old roots, in fact, it goes back to the medieval period, is to say, well, there was something medically dangerous about pork. And so Moses knew that, God knew that, put it in the Bible. And for people in certain situations, banning pork was rational and sensible. And that's a kind of medical materialism, that these rules of hygiene are all about kind of medical things that are done in another language, coded medical things that are done in the language of religion. And what Douglas wants to say is that on occasion there may be some medical overlap, but more often these are symbolic moves. And that's what she wants to explore. In what way is the banning of pork something that could be seen as a symbol, and never about hidden poisons or this or that or the other thing, but always had this kind of symbolic value. And that's what she is going to be exploring. So medical materialism is about a whole class of explanations for hygiene and pollution that are about coded language for medical reasons. And she wants to say, no, that's not what's happening. Instead, there's this other area of symbolic expression that's happening through these rules of pollution and hygiene. Now, what I want you to write about in a short response, there's going to be two kind of graded responses this week, on Monday and then Friday, because I want you to get into this book. On the first hand, what is dirt? Read chapter 2 and answer the question with some reference to this book. What is dirt? Why is dirt important for Mary Douglas? All right. That's your question for Monday. I look forward to seeing what you write. And then we'll have more reading for Wednesday, and that'll be our discussion. I'll put up a video for that as well. So enjoy Mary Douglas. It's a different and challenging way of thinking about religion.